Richard Walton, who's former head of the Met's Counter-Terror Command and now a senior fellow at Policy Exchange. And indeed, Mr. Walton has published a paper last year which said that XR's group's ideology was rooted in the political extremism of anarchism. Mr. Walton, thank you for coming on the show. Now, while I may support many of their motives, I can't support the way they act, but they're not really the mafia, are they? They can't be called an organised crime gang. Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Well, I mean, there's certainly the behaviour that we've seen is rather typical, but they are certainly engaged in organised criminality on a large scale, and their sort of tactics is one of civil resistance, a civil resistance model that is based on illegal action. I think what we saw over the weekend with the blockading of the various news print outlets was a form of anarchism. Effectively, it was rather typical. This is a group that rejects democracy and the liberal free market economy and explicitly seeks to overturn both. And that's really what they're trying to do.
There's criticism certainly of the police activity, or I have to say, Mr. Walton, inactivity in Hertfordshire. I can't speak to the North or to Motherwell, but do you think there was more that could have been done?
Well, I think the police have been robust in recent times. I mean, there's a bit of nervousness.
Well, I think, Mr. Walton, they weren't assessing the situation as they did. Is respectfully not being robust, is it?
Well, the Met certainly were very robust. I think what happened with the Hertfordshire police, there was, because they're not so used to the Extinction Rebellion, and this is one of the problems. Extinction Rebellion is a national movement, and yet you've got 43 police forces. So there's a sense of divide and rule, really, and what we need is a national coordinated response against this organisation from the police.
So how far do you think Priti Patel should go with any change in the law? You're an expert. You've done it. You've done the Counter-Terror Command.
I think she does need to change the law. I've been calling for a review of protest legislation for some time. In fact, that's in the Policy Exchange paper I wrote last year. I called for a review of the primary legislation that relates to protest, because it's now 40 years old. You've got the Highways Act, which is 1980, and the public order legislation is the mid-80s. And this legislation was put in place in a completely different era against different organisations. And now you've got an organisation that specifically, whose tactics are circumventing the law routinely. And I think the law needs to be revised and upgraded.
All right, thank you for that. That's Richard Walton, who was head of the Met's Counter-Terrorism Command, now a senior fellow at Policy Exchange.